All right, I see it. Okay, well, thank you all for uh, attending the webinar today. And as Pete said, our topic today is mesquite, how to treat. And one of the things that most of us think about mesquite as a pest, and that's, I'm sure, why you're here listening to the webinar to find out the latest on how to treat it. But I assure you that uh, this bull right here that's underneath that mesquite tree in August in South Texas is appreciating the fact that that mesquite is there. So it does have value. We just don't want it to overrun us. And one thing that I would caution you about is eliminate the word eradicate from your vocabulary. There's no way we're going to ever eradicate mesquite, but we can manage it, we can control it. So just don't think of in terms of never seeing mesquite again. This slide here indicates that mesquite also has some wildlife value. We did a publication several years ago. We went through different brush species and indicated what their value to different wildlife species was. And so the mesquite has some forage value for white-tailed deer. It has some mast value for several kinds of wildlife. It offers protection and also offers nesting and roosting habitat for birds. And so it does have some value. Okay, we do have several species of mesquite in Texas, but the one that's the most important is really the honey mesquite. This one is the one that we see mostly, I mean, around the most of the state except in the piney woods, and so that's the one that we're most concerned about. Out in West Texas, they have the western honey mesquite. That's a different species, and it's harder to control than the honey mesquite is. It's also called Toriana. So our primary focus today is going to be on the honey mesquite that covers most of the regions in the state. So we have we're going to have a couple of quiz questions in here for you. And the first question is, how long are mesquite seeds generally viable on the soil surface? And so Pete's going to pop up a survey or quiz here. And so what you need to do is just check what you think, 50 years or more, 10 years or more, less than a year. And when you're finished, we'll with your answers, we'll give when you've voted, we'll give you the answer. I think we've got all the, so about 60% of you think it's 10 years or more, and then 15% think it's 50, and 23% think it's less than a year. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to show you actually how long it does live. Actually, in a herbarium where we control temperature and humidity, the seeds can be viable up to 50 years of age. But out in nature, the viability on the soil surface is not high. I mean, in other words, if you put the seeds on top of the soil and you go back 12 months later, 95 to 99% of them will not germinate because they've deteriorated, or insects or rodents have destroyed the seed. So dispersal of the seeds to be successful really needs to occur in the year that the seed was produced. And a study around this study with the viability, that 12-month viability, that was actually conducted in the Vernon and the Uvalde areas, both those areas. And then around San Angelo, they looked at disappearance from the soil and what they saw in that study was that they disappeared in about 3 to 5 weeks. So a lot of different wildlife use the seed as well as livestock. I guess on the kind of on the unfortunate side is that a large mature tree could potentially in a good year produce about 50,000 seeds. So that still means there's a lot of seeds around. To get established, they need about 2/10 of an inch of soil cover on them. Most of the seeds are going to germinate within 1 year after they're planted or get in the soil. There's a low germination rate on top of the soil, and then they can germinate with organic debris cover, but they don't get established with just the organic debris. They have to have soil cover to get established. So soil cover is not necessary for germination, but it is, in other words, breaking out of the seed, but it is important or necessary for them to get a root down and get established. All right, so I said the viability was 1 to 5% a year after they were deposited on the ground from the tree. And this study here, they looked at survival of the seedlings 2 years after they were established. And you can see here that these are two different sites kind of up in the rolling plains. And they had a fairly low survival rate even after even being planted. So that's good news. And then the other thing that we look at is, or have to consider, is dispersal. This obviously is a cow pie or cow droppings, and if I can get there it is. Okay, right here where I've got that green arrow, that's a mesquite bean, and so this mesquite bean's then been deposited in that cow feces, and that's a rich, moist place to be deposited, and so we're going to get some germination in that kind of environment. And this next slide shows what can happen. I mean, I don't know how many seeds there were on this cow pie, but we found this one day we were out in the field. But you can see that we had a lot of these seeds germinating, and so fortunately not all of them are going to live. But germination through different animals varies. Horses, about 82% germination, steers about 70%, and then ewes, maybe because they chew more, only about 25% germination through their digestive systems. And so the question is, how much survival do we get in the feces of these animals? And this is another study that was done, and this is also fairly low rate. 12% with cattle, 13.5% with deer, and only 6.5% with coyotes. So even though they are deposited in this nutrient-rich medium, their 2-year survival rate is not very high. All right, this is a picture of a mesquite nursery that was established up in Spur, Texas in 1941, and all the places that you see these stakes here were places that they mechanically removed mesquite over a 25-year period. And there was no grazing in this nursery for that 25-year period. So after probably the first 2 or 3 years at most, there were no seeds left from the original deposition. So seeds had to be brought in by something, and so the wildlife that were going across this area were bringing in the seeds. And this just gives you a view of what they did here. In 1941, they mechanically removed 213 trees, and in every about 4 to 7 years until 1964, they'd go back in and mechanically remove the seedlings. So in 45, they removed 109, and 52, 185, 75 in 1957, and over that 25-year period, a total of 689 plants were removed, and that included 473 seedlings. And the point of all this is that we can't eradicate the plant. So it's going to come back. But we can, once we get mesquite to whatever is an acceptable level to you, we can maintain it. And so that's, if eradication is your goal, then you better take your money and go to Las Vegas with it, because you have a better chance there than you will eradicating mesquite. All right, so other factors in establishment, we need soil temperatures that are 77 degrees. We need soil moisture 3 to 5 days after the plants actually germinate. And that first year is real critical. During that first year, if we remove the top below the cotyledon of the plant, that destroys the plant. If we remove it above the cotyledon, we'll get survival. And the trees mature at about 3 years of age, and that's when they start producing flowers and seeds. And we see mature plants in two growth forms. One's a single stem, where the tree was never disturbed, that top was never removed, and then the multi-stem growth form is where juvenile top growth was removed or interrupted, or mature top growth was removed by dozing, shredding, fire, whatever, and was allowed it to come back. So this is just a picture here of those two kinds of growth forms, and part of the point of this is that this single stem growth form here, we've got more options in terms of control than we do with that multi-stem plant at the bottom. Okay, so mesquite is a legume, and so it does fix nitrogen, and plants that are less than 3 inches in stem diameter or trunk diameter and less than 14 feet tall actually actively fix nitrogen, but there's no real increase in the net soil nitrogen because they just don't produce enough. They're active, but they don't produce enough. And so for these kinds of stands, because they don't really benefit in things in terms of nitrogen, we kind of suggest that you should consider thinning those stands. And this is a mature mesquite down in South Texas. And under these mature mesquite, even though they're not as active as those younger plants, you have more nitrogen and carbon underneath the canopy than you do in the open spaces. And the other thing that we see is back here underneath the tree, you'll see the grass is going to be taller, and that's because there's a microenvironment there where it's cooler and more moisture, less moisture loss than there would be, at least at the surface area, than there would be out here in the open. So scattered mesquite can be beneficial, can be a good thing. A mesquite savanna situation can be a good thing. And so mesquite can interfere with forage production, and the level, as long as the canopy diameter or canopy cover is below 11%, illustrated by this red line, we don't have any problem with interfering or competition with forage. But when we start approaching that blue line, which is a 20% canopy cover, that's when we've got a problem with competition for forage growth. And these two graphs just illustrate how that might vary, how that canopy cover might vary with, that percent might vary with the size of the trees. So for example, if we have trees that are 5 foot canopy diameter, it would take about 450 of them to create that 20% cover. And if we have a 30-foot diameter, it would only take about 12 of those to be competitive with the forage. All right, so we've got that's kind of a background on mesquite ecology. What we're really probably here today interested in is the management of it, or the how to control it. And so we've got a lot of ways that we can control mesquite. We've got mechanical, like get a hold of this pointer here. Root plows, which we're used in South Texas a lot. Don't see that much of the root plow. I don't see it as often as it used to be used. We've got the excavators, which can pull plants out individually. We've got caterpillars with grubbers, like this one I'm pointing to. Also, this over here where the arrow is now, you can mechanically remove just smaller plants with something like this vendetta that this fellow invented. So we've got those mechanical methods, and obviously we've got aerial applications with airplanes, with helicopters, ground broadcast applications, individual plant treatments. So we've got a lot of different ways that we can go after the mesquite. So the suggestion is that we want to control the weakest link, and that's the seedling and juvenile stages. And that helps to prevent seed production, and it also lowers the cost. Those plants are cheaper to treat. Two things that affect the cost: one is size, and the other one is density. And so if we treat these younger plants that aren't as big, we're gonna use less effort. If it's chemical, we're going to use less chemical. If it's mechanical, it's easier to get them out of the ground. So I think it's important, it doesn't matter if it's mechanical or chemical, it's important to understand what the target is. And right here, we can see what the target is. This is actually below ground. You can see the soil. We got this arrow pointing to the soil surface here. So all of this that you see in this picture is below ground. And if you want to kill a mesquite, you have to either remove this, what we call bud zone, this dormant bud zone, mechanically from the soil, or you have to get a herbicide to move uniformly into that bud zone. So for example, if we have herbicide that just comes down and treats this side of the bud zone and doesn't get to the other side, we won't kill the plant. We'll have resprouting. So uniform movement of herbicide into that bud zone is really important. And that bud zone goes down to the first lateral root, which can be as deep as 18 inches. And that's why when people root plow, they'll get below 18 inches in the soil to cut that bud zone off. So this next slide kind of reinforces what I just said about uniform movement into the bud zone. This was actually a project that we did up in Kimball County, where we were looking at chemical control on brush and fence lines. And this mesquite right here we were spraying on the inside of the fence, and we weren't able to get the whole plant covered. And so we got one part of the plant was killed, and the rest of the plant survived because we didn't get uniform movement into that bud zone. So that's very important. All right, so back to the single stem and multi-stem plants. Single stem plants are a lot easier to control. We have more options, and multi-stem plants are more difficult to control. We've got less options, but they're also just more difficult. And this is an illustration of that. This was a study done several years ago. They applied did aerial applications of clopyralid, which is reclaim, And you can see here that when the number of stems was 1 to 2, they had an 85% plant mortality. When they had 3 to 5 stems, the mortality dropped down to 63%. And then when you had more than 6 stems, mortality dropped down to 41%. So that's a real good reason not to create, if you can help it, not to create multi-stem plants, because they're just harder to control and you have less options. Okay, so mesquite height is also a factor. When they're were less than 3 feet high, 76% kill, 3 to 6.5 foot, 74%, and then drop off to about 59% when we're over 6.5 feet tall. It's just harder to get coverage on those bigger plants. All right, so in terms of management, we have density considerations. When we have more than 400 trees per acre, then we really need to go to some kind of broadcast application. And we could go to either broadcast aerial or ground broadcast chemical, or broadcast mechanical. But when we get to that level of trees, we're going to have to, that's too many trees to make it economically feasible to treat these plants with individual plant treatments. With the mechanical treatments, we have to make sure that we remove the bud zone. Options that we have for mechanical broadcast or root plowing or chaining, and individual plant treatments, we can grub those plants. When we look at herbicide control considerations, we want uniform herbicide movement into the bud zone. With individual plant stem sprays and tree shears and spraying, we can do those any time of year. When we're doing leaf sprays, either broadcast or individual plant, we're going to do that treatment about 45 to 90 days after bud break in general. And we're going to talk more about this as we go through the rest of these slides. But there is a window for leaf spray treatments, and we can do the stem spray treatments just about any time of year. All right, so this is why this slide is illustrating why we need to be concerned about the density of the trees. We're looking at the blue line represents stem spray cost per acre, and the red line represents leaf spray, individual plant leaf spray cost per acre. And then this green line across the top here, that's a broadcast treatment, which doesn't matter what the density is, it's still $30 an acre, because you're looking at the cost of the herbicide. So it doesn't matter if you have 40 plants or you have 460 plants, you still got the same cost. So when we get out here to somewhere between 300 and 400 plants per acre, that's when the individual plant treatments are no longer economical. It just doesn't pay it to go after the plants in that way. And by the time you get to that point, you're probably also going to exceed the recommended per acre maximum of the herbicide if you're doing individual plant treatments. So the leaf spray herbicides, they're most effective when we have heavy foliage cover present and about 45 to 90 days after the first leaves emerge, or what we call bud break. Okay, and this leaf spray works best when we have a soil temperature that's greater than 75 degrees at 12-inch depth, when we have uniform dark green leaves on the plant with no significant hail, insect, or drought damage. And the reason that we don't want those kind of things happening is that's going to reduce the amount of leaf area that we have that's actually absorbing and translocating the herbicide to that bud zone. We also don't want any new leaves initiated, or very minimal amount of new leaves initiated by recent rains. And with mesquite, what we see is in a real wet year, we don't get as good a kill as we do in an average year or even slightly dry year. And the reason is we get these new flushes of growth, and that if you have enough of that on the tree, those leaves don't translocate the herbicide. If we have bean pods, we want those to be fully elongated, and if we have flowers, we want them to be yellow, not white. So those are the things that we're looking for in terms of when the mesquite's ready to treat from a leaf spray standpoint. And this is more even, more critical with aerial sprays, because we use such a low volume of herbicide or spray volume with those. All right, so looking at mesquite management, here on the left we've got a tree that's light green color, and this tree, it's too early to treat with a leaf spray because you've got these young leaves that are only manufacturing food for themselves. They're not translocating food down to that bud zone yet. And then on the right here, we've got a tree that has dark green leaves, and when that occurs, we know that the leaves are mature enough that they're producing more food than they need, and they're now translocating to that bud zone. And this dark green color corresponds with soil temperature, and we're going to look at that here as we go through some more of these slides. All right, so the first thing that happens in the kind of looking at when we're going to spray is mesquite bud break. And here, this picture down here in the left-hand corner, that's the leaves are just coming out, and that's defined as bud break. And these two maps of Texas show two different years, 2012 and 2014, and you'll see that there's a difference in when bud break occurred. So in 2012, we had bud break up here, in the Rolling Plains area on March 30th, and in 2014, by that time we still didn't have bud break. So you can see that in 2012 we had bud break earlier. Down here, generally had earlier. So not every year is the same, but we need to start looking at bud break to kind of get an idea when we might be able to start spraying. Okay, and so about 45 days after bud break is when we might be able to start spraying if everything else is in line. All right, so this is what things look like this year down in South Texas in Jim Hogg County. About the 23rd of February, we had bud break. Up here around the Uvalde area, March 19th, and out here in Fort Stockton, March the 30th. And I haven't gotten any reports of bud break north of these areas yet. So we're not at that point yet north of this area. Okay, another thing that is important, and this is vitally important if you're going to do aerial spraying, is soil temperature. I would not do any aerial spraying if I didn't know what the soil temperature was. And so we've got some tools here that we can use to measure soil temperature. We've got a soil thermometer here that has a 12-inch probe on it. And we need to have some tool like this, this one I'm pointing to here, that can make a pilot hole for us, unless we want to replace that thermometer pretty frequently, because these probes on the thermometers are kind of delicate, and most of the time I can't get the probe in the soil without making a pilot hole. So this tool here to drive a pilot hole, and then also a hammer to help drive it in, because a lot of times you can't just push that tool into the soil. So for aerial spraying, I think this is absolutely essential that you either have this equipment yourself, or you've checked with your county agent, somebody that's measuring soil temperature or knows what it is and can tell you that you're there. If you're doing individual plant treatments, there's really no reason you can't go with leaf color, because leaf color is a good indication. But like I said, this is just for aerial spraying. This is just a little added insurance that you know what the soil temperature was. So this is, again, we're looking at 2012 and 14, and in 2012, you can see that we had soil moisture, soil temperatures about 65 in this from the 12th of March to 29th of March down here around Corpus, and up here in the Panhandle about 58. Over here in 14, it was a little cooler conditions, like for example around the Uvalde area, 60 versus 66. So as this points out that every year can be different. And so this year, this is what it kind of looks like down around the Corpus area, somewhere around 68 degrees. Up here in the Uvalde area where I am, 64 to 66 during this March 19th to 31st time interval. Out in Fort Stockton, 60 degrees, and up around Stephenville, 58 to 60 degrees at 12 inches deep. So we're a ways away from, even down here at Corpus, we're a ways away from reaching 75 degrees. And 75 is the minimum. If it's 80, 85, that's even better. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause right here and see if anybody has any questions so far on anything that I've said. And
yeah, Kathy had a question on the slide, one of the earlier slides on I guess economics of. Can you repeat that question, Kathy?
oh yeah, the cost per acre on yeah, that was comparing herbicide stem spray individual plant treatment and herbicide leaf spray individual plant versus herbicide broadcast. And it just illustrates what the threshold is in terms of cost. Somewhere around 300 to 400 plants per acre. And when you get to that level, it's really best to go with uh, with some kind of broadcast application. And yeah, the cost that I showed you there was just herbicide. So you'd have to add your application fee, whatever that happened to be. And actually, with the new herbicide, that cost is going to go up just a little. It's going to go up a little bit. All right. So for broadcast application, we can use fixed wing aircraft. We can use helicopters. Helicopters have really come on pretty strong in the last few years. A lot of those are being used now. And then we've got ground broadcast applications. For ground broadcast, you need to get about 18 inches above the height of the trees. So a device like this we're showing might get there, but there's going to be a limit from a ground broadcast standpoint. Okay, so one of the things that's we're finding is pretty important. This is a study that was conducted up at the McGregor Research Station a couple of years, well, probably 3-4 years ago, and they have made the application with helicopters, and they varied the droplet size, the spray droplet size, and they also so we go from 412 microns in droplet size all the way up to 796, and they looked at 3 gallons, 6 gallons, and 10 gallons in this 400 range, and then at the 500 micron range or level, they went and above, they went to 10 gallons per acre, thinking that, you know, with more gallons we get better coverage. So what really made the most difference was the size of the droplet. So you can see that all these 400 micron levels, whether it's 3 gallons per acre, 6 gallons, or 10 gallons per acre, gave us control in the 80% range. When we got up above 500 microns, even though we put on 10 gallons per acre, the control level dropped to 74%, which is still good. I mean, that's very good from a broadcast standpoint. But then we got up here around 600 microns, drops to 46, and then close to 800 microns, down to 34, even though we're applying more gallons. What's happening is at these larger droplet size, the spray droplets are dropping through the plants. They're not really adhering to the plants. So, you know, you can have droplet size that's too small, but you can also have droplet size that's too big. So probably the best droplet size would be somewhere around this 443 or so, and no higher than say 550 or so. You want to stay in that range. Actually, we didn't look at using a smaller or less gallons with the 545 microns. But our recommendation on gallons per acre from the air is a minimum of 4 gallons per acre. So if we have 4 gallons per acre and we have droplet size in this 400 micron range, we should be able to get good coverage on these mesquite. All right, so there's a new herbicide out, been out for probably, I don't know, 3 years or so, and it's made by Dow AgroSciences, and it's targeting primarily mesquite. We're looking at it for investigating its use on weesatch, but we know what it does on mesquite. It's it has several benefits. One of the benefits is it's a standalone product, so there's no mixing of herbicide. It has 2 active ingredients in it. It's clopyralid and aminopyralid. Clopyralid is the active ingredient in Reclaim, and then aminopyralid is the active ingredient in another herbicide called Milestone. So they put these two herbicides together, and they're getting some synergistic activity with those. Another advantage of this particular herbicide is lower volatility because it has no ester formulation in it. When we use Remedy and Reclaim, the Remedy part of that spray or Triclopyr ester herbicides, those are ester formulations and they're volatile. All right, it is also non-restricted use, so that means that you don't have to have a pesticide applicator license to buy it. You may get asked for your license when you go to buy it, but that's a situation where the retailer is trying to make sure that people that don't have that herbicides that require a license don't get sold to people that don't have a license. And another advantage is there are no livestock grazing restrictions. There are some haying restrictions, but where we've got mesquite, I don't think we're going to be doing much haying anyhow. All right, so this is why you might want to consider the Sendero. And if we look at this is these are 1 and 2 years after treatment, and Sendero here at 28 ounces per acre, Reclaim at 21.3 ounces, and then Reclaim at 10.7, Remedy plus Remedy at 8 ounces per acre. And let's look at the 2 years. So the average at 2 years for Sendero is 77 versus 53 for Reclaim versus 60 for the Reclaim Remedy. So there's a 16 percentage point difference between Sendero and the Remedy Reclaim mix. And so that looks like it's different. I mean, that is 16 points different. Statistically, we can't say that those are different because these error bars here overlap. They overlap each other, so we can't say that they're different statistically. But here's what we can say. And this slide here, if you look at how much variation there is around that average kill, so for example, around 77%, that bar there above and below, that's how much variation there is. And then over here, above and below that 60%. So what we can say is that Sendero is more consistent. There's less variation around that average. And so that's one of the advantages that we're seeing with Sendero. And these are all aerial applications here. This slide right here just compares by year Sendero to remedy reclaim and to reclaim. And then over here, and you see that in 09 and 10, that the Sendero outperformed the other two, was more consistent than the other two. And then in 2011, the study only included Sendero versus remedy reclaim. And you'll notice that in 2011, the control rate dropped significantly down to 49% for Sendero and down to 35% for the remedy reclaim. And the reason for this is, if you remember 2011, it hasn't been that long ago, it was one of the driest years on record in Texas. You have to go back to 1917 to find a year that was that dry across the state. So that was a year that you shouldn't be spraying. If you have a year like that, you shouldn't be spraying mesquite. Of course, these are tests, and we can do these kind of things and make mistakes, and then helps you avoid those mistakes. But in a average to slightly dry year, you're going to be fine on spraying mesquite. But when we get into, if we get into an area where we got severe extreme drought, that's an area or situation we want to avoid doing leaf sprays. Okay, so mechanically, we've got several options. Up here in the left-hand corner, that's a device called a Vendetta. This fella took a grubbing hoe and he cut it off about 5 inches wide, sharpened it, put an inch and a quarter steel pipe in there for the handle, and he uses it to grub small mesquite out of the ground. Root plowing gets below, they try to get below 18 inches in the soil, and then they'll come in along behind that and they'll rake and stack the mesquite to get it out of the soil so it doesn't have a chance to reroot, plus it gets it out of the way. And in recent years, we've seen a lot of this excavating done with mesquite, and that definitely gets that bud zone out of the ground. And then, of course, the grubber is on a caterpillar like this is also a possibility for we got 3 individual plant treatments right here, plus this root plow would be considered a broadcast treatment. So we've got several ways we can go after the plants mechanically. Then chemically, we've got stem sprays, we've got leaf sprays, and then we've got we can do cut stump applications. And we'll talk some more about cut stump here in a minute or so. All right, so what kind of tools do we use for the stem sprays? We like to use these backpack sprayers. I don't care what model you buy. I mean, we're not trying to promote any model, but backpack sprayers, if you're going to do stem sprays, they're a really good tool. They're better than the pump up type sprayers that, with the little, I think I got a picture in a minute. But we also added a back saver harness, which is a aftermarket harness that you can buy, and adjustable cone nozzle on there, and we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so for another quiz question here, for stem sprays, how many stems per plant are best for that treatment method? 1 to 3, 4 to 7, or does it make any difference? We got a few people that haven't voted yet. We're not going to hold it against you if you're wrong. Okay, I think most people have voted. So the answer is 1 to 3. Um, and the reason is that once we get above 3 stems, it becomes more expensive to treat the plant because we have to treat every stem and we have to go around every stem. And the other reason I think is that we don't get uniform movement into that bud zone. So here's a single stem mesquite that's being treated, and in this case, it's being treated with this flat cone nozzle, or I'm sorry, flat nozzle, fan nozzle that typically comes with a lot of these sprayers. And the problem with this fan nozzle is that it's wasting a lot of spray volume here. So if we go to the right kind of nozzle, we can reduce that, eliminate that loss. We can save about 80% of the spray volume by going to the right kind of nozzle. And what we suggest is something like these ConeJet X1 nozzles or X2s for that stem spray. And then behind that, you put in a screen check valve, 100 mesh screen check valve. And what that does, uh, the screen keeps the nozzle from getting clogged, and the check valve uh, keeps the nozzle from dribbling. Once you let up on the trigger, you don't get the dribbling from the nozzle, which keeps things cleaner and doesn't waste your herbicide. Okay, so this is what the spray looks like when you're using the right kind of nozzle. You can't see any overspray here, and if you look close, you'll see that the stem is wet with the diesel herbicide mixture that we're using. In this case, we were using Remedy and diesel. Okay. What's available for the stem sprays up to now has been Triclopyr ester, which is available in Remedy Ultra, or some generics like Clear Pasture, and there's other generics like Triclopyr 4E, Triclopyr 4EC. Uh, if you're looking at these generics, you want to make sure that they've got the same amount of active ingredient, same pounds of active ingredient per gallon that something like the Remedy Ultra would have. And the Remedy Ultra is a 4-pound per gallon product. Okay, so for doing stem sprays, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a 15 to 25% Triclopyr ester plus 75 to 85% diesel or vegetable oil. Actually, the diesel is cheaper than the vegetable oil is going to be. We're going to lightly wet all the stems all the way around from the ground line to 12 inches high. And this works any time of year, and there's no soil activity. And we're not going to let this spray mix puddle up on the ground for 2 reasons. It would be way too expensive to do that, but the other reason is we don't need to. And we use this method, we can use this up to about 4 inches in stem diameter. Once that bark becomes corky or rough, that's when this method doesn't work as well. Okay, so I have another question for you here. Can Sendero be mixed with diesel for stem sprays or cut stumps? New herbicide, what can we use it for? I think I forgot to put a yes or no on this slide for your quiz.
give me a minute here. I'm gonna do a short answer and see what kind
Okay.
we get.
Just yes or no.
There you go. I did a short answer. Maybe I can type it in.
Okay. We got some yeses and we got some nos. Sorry about that, Pete.
That's okay. I missed it. Sorry about that.
No, it's my fault. I didn't put the question down there underneath or the answer, or, the choices down there. All right, so we've got both some yeses and some nos. And so I'm going to show you the answer in this next slide. All right, so the answer is no. On the left, we've got remedy in diesel, and you can see that the remedy is mixed in the diesel. And here on the right, this is Sendero in the diesel, and the Sendero is down here at the bottom. And the reason that the Sendero won't work in diesel is it's not an ester, it's not an oil-based herbicide. It's an amine-based herbicide, and it's not manufactured to mix with diesel. So, and so you might say, well, just shake it up. All right, so we shook it up and set the jar down, and you can see that, and I did this as quick as I could, and you can see that it's already starting to precipitate out, and then you let it sit there, and very quickly, within just a few seconds, it's settling out. So the answer is no. So please don't try to use Sendero as a stem spray. And the other reason you wouldn't want to use it is it wouldn't be cost effective, because it costs about $142 a gallon versus Remedy and those generics that are probably in the 70s per gallon. All right, so excuse me, our individual plant leaf spray, we can use these pump up type sprayers like this, but they're really kind of a pain to use. We can use backpack sprayers, but for leaf sprays, they're not the best thing, because uh, you don't want to carry 3 to 4 gallons around on your back for very long. So what we've done is we've equipped ATVs, and now with the availability of the mules, you could put these spray tanks on mules. Here on the right, we've got an ATV with a spray tank, and it's got two 20-foot hoses coming off. So we've got a 3-person crew here that can go across and cover a 40-foot swath as they go. So for very much leaf spray, these bottom two are the better choices. All right, so when we go to leaf spray, individual plant leaf spray, now we're going to switch nozzle size. We're going to go to an X8, because now we want a high volume coming out of that. We don't want to be spending all day trying to get the coverage that we need. The standard up to this point has been Triclopyr in Remedy or Remedy Ultra, or the generics, and clopyralid, which is in Reclaim, plus a surfactant plus a dye. And so the next few slides here are going to illustrate why you might want to look at Sendero as an alternative. So here, this is a study, 10 sites, and this is looking at Sendero at a half, 3/4, and 1% concentration in water. With the 0.5%, we got 74% kill, which is very good. 87% with the 3/4, very good. We can't say these two are different statistically, because those bars overlap. And then 1%, we get to 93. And again, we can't say that they're different statistically. And with the Remedy Reclaim, we've got 78% average. So which one do we want to pick? Well, the one that's given us the best consistency is the 1% Sendero. So that's what we've gone with in our suggestions, and you'll see that there's more variation here with the Remedy Reclaim at a 0.5% each than there is with the Sendero at 1%. So that's a reason to maybe consider using the Sendero at a 1% concentration. You're going to get more consistency. Okay, so our Brush Busters leaf spray option, we can use 1% Sendero, or we can use the Triclopyr plus 1%, half percent Triclopyr and half percent clopyralid, which is reclaim or generic, and a generic either remedy or those generics or reclaiming those generics. 1/4% surfactant, 1/4% dye, and this is mixed in water. You spray to wet, leaves to wet after the leaves turn dark green. And the spray window, yeah, I see I got a funny icon right here. That's I didn't put a mailbox in there, but about 45 days after bud break through maybe September, depending on where you are. In South Texas, we can't go up into September. We can go probably to the end of July, but our recommendation is you get in there as quick as you can and after the window opens up. All right, we want carbohydrate flow going down, which is indicated by this dark green color. Cut stump. This is a method that we can use. We cut the stems close to the ground. We want to avoid leaving soil on the cut stumps. We want to treat the stumps immediately, and you want to spray the whole cut surface and whatever bark is sticking up above the ground. This picture here on the right, that's too much stem sticking up above the ground. You got to spray all of that, plus it's an accident waiting to happen. So you want to cut fairly close to the soil surface. And this cut stump is almost 100% effective if it's done right. Here's two mistakes that can be made. Here they missed one stem, and so you're getting resprouting. And here on the right, they didn't cover the whole cut surface, and it's resprouting. So you didn't get uniform movement into that bud zone, and that's why that's sprouting back on you. All right, so our recommendations and considerations, you want to establish some long-term goals. Realize that if you're going to deal with managing mesquite, you're in it for the long haul. Eradication is not possible, management is. You want to target smaller, younger plants. You don't want to make the plants smaller, you want to target those smaller and younger plants because that's the weak link. Multi-stem plants more difficult to control. You may have to retreat every 3 to 7 years. You want to defer grazing where seeds are produced to try to keep animals from spreading them more. You might consider fencing off areas with high seed production to avoid that distribution. And if livestock get access to the seeds, you might want to confine them in an area, say 3 to 6 days, so you can get them to pass those seeds. And then good grazing management, where you got a good grass cover, can discourage seedling establishment because they don't can't get established well on grass. All right, so with that, if anybody's got any questions, I'm going to try to answer them here. All right.
Well, the first question is it recommended not to use surfactant?
No,
with Sendero?
with Sendero, you do want to use the surfactant, and with a non-ionic surfactant, you'd want to use about 1/4%. So in 100 gallons, you'd have a quart. And okay, the next question I see it, Pete, is surfactants, non-ionic or methylated seed oil, what's best? Either one of those is fine. What we like to see in surfactants is something that's, say, 80 to 90% or more active ingredient and is non-ionic. And these methylated seed oils or methylated seed oil surfactant blends, they do a really good job. So we haven't really been able or haven't parsed out or separated out which one works better, but when you get a good, just get a good quality product, either non-ionic or the methylated seed oil. You don't want to do a good job. I mean, we've worked with both of them, and they've both done well. I see a question there about anything yet to kill agarita. We can kill agarita with cut stump method, uh, but past that, there's really not much. We don't have anything yet. Maybe in the near future, though. Okay, I see Isaac's got a question here on aerial applications. Are electrostatic booms more effective? No, I don't. I mean, we have no data. What I should say is we have no data to indicate that electrostatic booms are more effective. Uh, I've seen some applications that were not good, so it's not something that we're recommending until unless and until we have data to support their use. And so all of our aerial application recommendations are 4 gallons or more, at least 4 gallons of spray volume. And the electrostatic booms will be try to use 1 or 2 gallons. Okay, and Tony, does Sendero or Remedy kill purple thistle as well? All right. Those would be too expensive to go after the thistle with. And what we on thistle, if it's in the rosette stage, you can get it with 2,4-D, any broad leaf herbicide, 2,4-D, P plus D, Weedmaster, any of those will do a good job on thistles. Once they bolt, once they have stem elongation, you've got to use a higher herbicide level, but you can still kill them. Okay, and then can I comment on preliminary results of Sendero on Weesatch? As an individual plant leaf spray, the Sendero is looking good. But as a broadcast treatment, by itself, not as good. One of the problems we have with Weesatch is just coverage. It's a much more difficult plant to deal with. If I had to choose between which problem I wanted, mesquite or Weesatch, I'd pick mesquite, because we know a whole lot more about mesquite than we do Weesatch. So, like I said, preliminary results, they're looking good as far as individual plant leaf sprays. Okay, if you cut stump agarita, what do you treat the stump with? You would treat it with 15% Remedy Ultra or a generic some triclopyr ester in diesel, just like you would any other cut stump treatment. And you know, the same rules would apply. You want to treat it immediately, cut it close to the ground, but not so close you push soil up on it. If you do get soil on those cut surfaces, that acts like a wick, and it keeps you from having good contact between the herbicide and the cut surface.
Yeah, I don't see more questions coming in. So, folks that are out there,
Looks like
I guess
that's
somebody
maybe all
talking. While they type the question,
questions.
if you're here for CEU, register for CEU, please
Well,
type
somebody's
in
typing.
your email address. Help
Yeah.
Michelle and myself to kind of keep track of the CEUs. And I see Joe has questions.
Yeah, Joe says, are there notes available? Uh, no, but we've got, if you'll go to agrilifebookstore.org, uh, actually everything that I talked about today is in there. We've got uh, Brushbuster publications on how to treat mesquite. We've got there's a publication on mesquite ecology and management that has basically this most of this presentation was based on. So that information is available in written form if you go to the AgriLife bookstore. You got to, you need to establish a password and an account on there, but you can download those
Here in a little bit,
publications
you ought to
as
have
PDF files for free
a
if you
satisfaction
want to.
survey pop up. Please fill it in. It'll help us improve. And we're still taking questions. I just want to kick that out. And the other thing is, if you follow us on Facebook, it's facebook.com/txrange.
Yeah.
There's some good educational videos on cut stump spraying and different type of nozzles. There's really some good information on the fan page, and it also talks about some of this, like Dr. Lyons said about the bookstore. If by some chance, whenever the satisfactory questionnaire covers up your screen, if you just look down at your taskbar, you ought to see like little three little gentlemen green icon. You click on it, it'll bring it back to you to the webinar. Our next session is going to be May 7th, 2015, and the topic's going to be patch burning and grazing, why it works, and how do I do it. And our speakers are going to be Dr. Bob Lyons, Dr. Morgan Russell, and Dr. Megan Clayton. Please join us. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Day or
Hey
G
Pete,
Day. Yes.
there was somebody that typed
The
in there.
CU
They had a
login
problem with
is
the
going to be open
CU
for a month
login.
because we will have this thing up for credit for a month. You can always go back in there and register. The link should be on the website, the Natural Resource webinar website, and I can type. Let me get that right quick and I'll type it out. You can go here, the Natural Resource webinar.tami.edu, and you can go register because it'll be up for a month. It'll still take registration. Yes, and uh, the